Hey, I think you're going to like this one. What's up? My name is Adrian. Welcome to Rabona TV. And today we're talking about Italia. So we talked about Portugal already and some of the struggles they've had. One of the powers in football, if you want to consider them that. I mean, I think they are, at least talent-wise. Now, we're talking about the defending European champions. Just 4 months ago, they were lifting the trophy. And now they are off to the playoffs for the 2022 World Cup. And I brought along with me someone who's actually been on the channel before, but someone who I think you're going to really like, Martino Puccio. He does some work for The Athletic, State of Play podcast. He also works for 1:37 p.m. and Proper Football. I mean, this guy does a lot. And you'll see he actually knows a lot about Italian football, a ton about Italian football. I had to stop the man from displaying his knowledge at certain points during this conversation because he would have just kept on going. And that's a good thing. We like that. Anyways, it was one of those times where I was interviewing him to make, a long form video, and then it just turned into a long form conversation that I think you guys will get a lot of value out of. So enjoy this conversation between myself and Martino, speaking about Italy, speaking about what's wrong, speaking about the issues they have, not only in the number 9 position, a position that's talked about a lot when it comes to Italy, but at the center back position as well. They need to start getting that talent factory up and running in Italy at the moment. So without further ado, let's get into it. So I look at the form of Italy, and you can almost divide the timeline into 2 different ages, like pre-Euro and then post-Euro. There's 3 2-0 wins prior to Euro, and then 1 win from 5, I believe, after the tournament. So was there a change in approach at all in these Final Four qualifiers, Martino? Or is it just, that slump that comes after the tournament?
I think this is a combination of both. I think the slump was just really visible the first international break when they came back, which must have been in September. And you kind of saw the timidness and the lack of, pressing. Prior to the Euro starting, you could see the way they were playing against the Czech Republic. It was like a 4-0 beatdown. And I was sitting there saying, this is great. This is the energy that you want to bring after a long season when the schedule's condensed, after coming back in the summer from COVID and then jumping right back into the season in September. Energy levels were high. And then you go into the tournament, they win the tournament. They were a little shaky towards the end, but tournament games are tough to win. Semi-final matches into the final, none of the 4 teams played amazing. You could argue Spain played the best out of everybody and was the team that got sent packing home. I think it comes from tired legs. You see guys like Barella who shot. The lack of the goal scorer of a number 9 is magnified now when there's not that high pressing. There's not great creation on the wings because Insigne could not be playing more matches. And honestly, the pressing is just not there. But again, there's no excuse for any of this, right? Because Northern Ireland, tough place to play. But where's the excuse for Bulgaria 1-1? Where's that at home where you're registering so many shots on goal? You have all these opportunities, none of them go in the back of the net. You start Florenzi, who rarely plays for Milan. Now you look at it, he was the reason why there was a goal scored in that one. Forget about the lack of scoring, right? That's Mancini's decision to start someone like that, and it bites them in the ass, where it's they weren't limited in options. They had Davide Calabria, who was playing well. Di Lorenzo was playing well. And it's why don't you take stuff like that seriously? Every single home game that Italy should be playing within this group should have been a win. Just like I'm sure the same way you think about Portugal or any other top nation that has hopes of not only making it to the World Cup, hoping to win it. It's inexcusable for stuff like that. The lack of goal scoring is so obvious. Creating the defensive issues, I gotta say, it's just so magnified without Chiellini there. Bonucci is not close to the same player, even though I think he was at the bottom of the list of guys that you could point the finger to. But he's not the same. Everyone knows it. If you watch that Nations League game against Spain, he gets sent off for a stupid second yellow. That kind of sums it up without Chiellini. But Francesco Acerbi as one of those options. He's not coming off the best season with Lazio. Lazio in general not coming off the best season. You put someone like that in there. He didn't try Bastoni. Donnarumma's not as sharp. You see Donnarumma dive for that ball against Switzerland when Okafor scores it. You're I've seen Donnarumma make that save countless times at Milan. That still hit his hand and went in the net. I think there's just a classic lack of accountability for trying to change things up when things weren't working. The whole reason there was so much success behind this team was because we changed up the old way that Italy used to play. Yeah. Instead of sitting back and trying to hit them on a counterattack, we adapted to the modern game. We pressed high. We kept on going at other teams, trying to create chances, and it worked. And they won their first Euro since 1968. The funniest part in all of this, Adrian, they've lost one game. And one of those games were not in qualifiers. And it was in the Nations League that I said it doesn't count unless you win it. So for me, I think this is just a culmination of everything. And the classic stubbornness that constantly resurfaces every now and then for Italy is showing once again. Everything that we get in a vacuum of Italy and Italian national team football has shown itself since early June up until now in November.
So you definitely touched upon a lot of things that I want to sort of break down a little bit here. Yeah, starting with, no, it's all good. This is what we want. Now let's break it down. So first of all, it almost looks like a lack of freshness in the squad, like you were saying. I think that Barella is sort of becoming the poster boy for that because the guy looks bagged. But when you look at the squads that Mancini is calling up since the big win at Euro 2020, how do you feel about them? You know, would you want to see some fresh faces in there? Does he need to bring in some fresh faces? Maybe like, hey, some of you need to take a break, like an Insigne, for example.
That's the thing. They're trying other strikers. Belotti got to start. There was the Raspadori and Moise Kean that got the opportunity, and they scored a few goals. I believe it was against Lithuania. All right, you get the job done against Lithuania. But like Belotti, like you can't step up in a game like that. You can't score goals in certain instances where the guy gets one chance against Switzerland and rightfully was benched. I mean, why would he deserve another start in that? Where it's one thing if you start, you play poorly and you don't score. And you start, you create and do all the little things that are required of you, but it just wasn't your night in terms of the ball going in the back of the net. And it's understandable against Switzerland because Switzerland is a good team. They beat the world champions. They knocked them out. Regardless of what Italy did in the group stage, they're still a good team. And anyone who follows the sport closely recognizes the talent. Ultimately, what it comes down to is he put enough fresh legs in there, but in certain areas it was odd because the subs were great in the Switzerland game, but then he does start those players like Tonali, like Berardi, and they don't show up in that game. And then at a certain point, it's like, okay, do we point to Mancini or is it the players that need to step up? I think it's a combination of both. The false nine was something that they switched to in the final that ended up working, where Insigne was playing, where they were putting a winger like Chiesa on the left and then someone like Berardi on the right. As well, like Insigne, it's hard for a player like that to play this much. At his size, at his age, with all these minutes, constantly being the guy on the left side. And it's not like there's a lack of players that he could put on the left side. Like, you could put Chiesa on the left. He's played there on the left. He doesn't play a ton of minutes at Juve. We've seen it time and time again that Allegri's sitting him in a match against Inter in one of the biggest games of the season, and he doesn't start. This guy has more fresh legs than we'd like to let on. And on top of it, he's got the best work rate out of any Italian at the moment. Jorginho, yeah, maybe he doesn't play a ton of minutes with them, but like Barella, you could take Barella out and start Locatelli in a game because it's not like Barella's absolutely dynamite all the time for Italy. He had his games where he struggled during the Euros. It's not like he's been a 10 out of 10 like he is with Inter most of the time. I think the freshness with the defensive players is the most concerning thing, without a doubt, is that players like Bastoni, when is he going to get in, Adrian? When is Bastoni supposed to break into this team? Okay, yeah, he plays primarily at 3 at the back, but we can't ease him in as a center back. He played against Spain. That was an awful game for everyone in general, so that's not really fair. You know, they played Belgium after that. It's when are you going to integrate him? Because it's a quick turnaround. We're 1 year away from the World Cup. When does Bastoni finally start to fit in here? Because again, you're relying on Chiellini and Bonucci. Bonucci's not that young either, by the way, for a center back. So he has to play the rest of this season. We go into summer, whatever, it's a decent enough break. He's back in there. Like, I don't know how his body's going to handle that. Juve doesn't have a lot of center back depth to begin with. Like, Chiellini gets hurt. The next option is Rugani off the bench, where it's just De Ligt and Bonucci. Like, there's a serious issue there. And not only when Chiellini gets hurt, if he were to miss time, or vice versa with Bonucci, Bonucci gets more minutes. And Bonucci at his age has to play a lot more. And it's all a trickle-down effect of impacting these players down the line, on top of you have to play more important playoff games now. You have 2 more that you have to play come March, because instead of just relaxing and easing things in and maybe integrating newer, younger faces, you have to stick with the old guard because It's probably your only chance to advance. So I think he needs to look at other options center back wise, and it's also not his fault because there isn't a lot of talent. This is probably the weakest defensive talent as a whole for Italy that I've certainly seen in my life. Maybe the 2010 team, because they were still holding on to Fabio Carvalho at the time.
And that's actually what I wanted to ask you about next, Martino, is because I was looking at the center backs, and it's Chiellini, Bonucci, Bastoni. But then looking at the prospects, looking at the guys coming through, like I'm sure you follow the U21s closer than I certainly do. Is there anyone coming through that you look at and you think they're the future of our back line? They're the future of the spine of this team?
I mean, it would really just be Bastoni. The rest are good players at center back positions, like Romagnoli, good player, not great. Not going to be Nesta, never going to be Chiellini. At the most, you'd hope he's at a Barzagli resurgence level where he plays his best football later on, or be a better version than Pika Cerbi, which I do think he could be. When he was paired with Bonucci one year, he outplayed Bonucci. And that was at the time where Bonucci, moving from Juve to Milan, was a top 5 center back in the world, no debate. Lovato out of Atalanta is one of the younger ones, but again, doesn't always start there for a team that could use a starter like that. There's Mancini at Roma, again, not someone that I like to point at that I think could start and help you win a World Cup. I don't even think that these guys are at the level of an actual top club. I don't think that Romagnoli gets to Milan if it's like prime Milan. If it's like 2005, no chance. Like Romagnoli's like even a rotational guy. He's like on the Bonera type level of stuff. That's the standard that you have to raise it to. And if he's not getting call-ups now when he's rebounding, it's kind of telling. A lot of the depth and top players that we see from Italy now, it's just basically the midfield. That's where all the talent is at this point. Some fullbacks, yeah, maybe okay. But even then, we're kind of looking at a couple decent wingers coming up, but there's no true striker. There's no true center back. They're fine for goalkeeper for the next 10 to 15 years. I think there's a lot more holes in the long term than a lot of people like to let on. But again, you know how fast it could change with national teams.
For sure.
The talent level that's at Portugal now compared to when they won the trophy is night and day, in my opinion, for Portugal than it was in 2016. And yet they're struggling far more than any Portuguese team that I can remember in recent memory, especially the past like 8 years or so, especially relative to expectations. So I think Italy, there's a lot of parallels in the same boat where we're looking at the past 2 European champions that are how long is too long to hold on to a manager and a core of players until you have to say, keep it fresh, keep it going. Because it's funny, I think people are just now recognizing how amazing Spain was, because that to me too is holy crap. Like they kept most of the same core. They changed up a couple of things in terms of forwards and like false nines and all that. 3 straight tournaments.
Unprecedented.
It's never going to be redone, and it's the greatest stretch for a national team that I've seen that we'll probably ever see. And if we see something better, I mean, hats off to whoever that is. But again, it's a testament to the standard of this. Good news is you have a few months to recoup. Everything is off your mind. You focus on club football for the longest period of time, and it's one game. There's some favorable matchups that they could get, but again, in football, one game's one game, man. Like you could be out on your ass in a second if you're not sharp enough.
No, you're absolutely right. And you absolutely hit on pretty much every single talking note. I was going to talk about the striker issue. I was going to talk about the depth issue at center back. You nailed it, man.
That's why I can't sleep. It's the bags under my eyes. And it's funny too because it's you know what the issue is, and you went through all the other options, and all the other options are worse than the main option that you had to begin with. So it's like we're back to square one. We have to probably depend upon Immobile. Yeah,
I guess it sort of feels like it was the perfect sort of marriage of everything, where it was like sort of catching lightning in a bottle, and it's hard to see it doing that. It's hard to see them, doing that again going forward, isn't it? Especially when you consider the ages of the rocks, Chiellini and Bonucci.
It's because it's a lot to ask, because he can't even complete most of the season. He's been getting injured. Chiellini even got hurt in the match against, it might have been Switzerland in the final minute. Not in the final minute, not the final match day. But there's like your example right there, because not only are you asking these players to play full seasons and minutes after minutes, Chiellini also tore his ACL not too long ago, so that impacts the guy. Then you're asking him middle of the season to stop, not where it's like a few week break. Like, we're into it, Adrian. Like, we go right in. You have like 5 days. You have to prepare. It's going to be very hot. We saw what happened to them when they were old and slow in 2014, when they even made it to Brazil. Costa Rica physically dominated. We're talking about, holy crap, Italy could not look slower in this. And the best athlete on the field is looking to headbutt somebody in Balotelli. Yeah. So really, we're looking at potentially still the final match that Italy played in the World Cup is when Luis Suarez got away with biting Chiellini. And that's what we're looking at.
Ouch.
And we're talking about 2014. We're talking about 8 years ago almost. And that's what it's going to come down to. And think about it. Like, Italy missing, not only did they miss the first World Cup since the 1950s, it could be missing the back-to-back World Cups for the first time ever. And even the funnier thing is, too, whatever sense of urgency Italy could have in this, and this is what everybody's talking about, they're getting all hands up in the air about the playoff spots and this and that, and how can you dictate what region could have more teams or not? We're going to 48 teams in 2026. Everything we're worried about and upset about right now is going to be null and void.
This playoff, man, the revamping of the playoff, this is something that we were talking about after our conversation, but for a neutral, watching this, you're basically getting 3 pretty damn good tournaments to take in when it comes to these playoffs with the way that they've sort of set them up. But when you are a supporter of one of the nations that's actually taking part in it, damn, man, red card early in the game, injury, horror, own goal, something like that. You don't have a second leg to turn it around. So it's going to be fun for you guys as the neutrals. It's going to be very stressful for anyone who's watching a nation that they support take part in it. Oof. But anyways, guys, I hope that you enjoyed this. I like switching up the content from just me to getting someone in on every once in a while. And if you did, do drop a like for me. Like I said, YouTube changed how likes and dislikes affect the video. So if you liked this video and you want to see more of me, do like the video or subscribe if you're not subscribed yet. If you dislike it, well, you probably won't see me anymore. So that's a way to get rid of me. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. I'm Adrian. Take care.